You're listening to the Useless Runner podcast, stories about sport, resilience, real connections, and friendship from an average guy who keeps showing up. Find more at theuselessrunner.com, on Facebook at Useless Runner, or on Spotify at the Useless Runner podcast. Okay, hello everyone. This is AJ, your host at the Useless Runner podcast. First of all, I want to thank you for your time today. And we're going to start today's episode with a word of the day that will set the tone for this week's episode and will help us understand the context of what we are going to explore today. So today's word is pragmatism. Pragmatism is defined as the quality of dealing with a problem in a sensible way that suits the conditions that really exist, rather than following fixed theories, ideas, or rules. So pragmatism is defined as that, but in the context of today's episode, it's also one of the most important tools for success, especially in sport and in life, in my opinion. We get fixated on fixing a problem by forcing what we believe should be done instead of facing what the reality of the situation is telling us. The same happens in training and sport. Preparing for races and events, we fall into fixed ways of doing things. We shut out suggestions, we ignore what our body is telling us, and keep pushing the way we want even when it's not working, or it's not working as efficiently as it should. And that's where pragmatism matters, because without it, we can lose ourselves chasing the plan instead of chasing the truth. And then once that happens, we miss our real potential. So this sets the tone for today's episode, where I'll share the ups and downs of my first Ironman training, my first Ironman 70.3, and how I realized I needed help that brought not only a better performance, but also a deeper human connection with someone who lives and breathes pragmatism every single day. So, with that being said, let's dig into it. Okay, so back in 2018, I had worked through a lot of things in my life since my mother's passing back in 2012. There were obviously difficult times for me personally, socially, in sport, in life, my family, everything really got together. And it took me a while to get out of that hole. Fortunately, I met good friends along the way. I reconnected with Mario, as I explained on the second episode of the podcast. And by 2018, I felt that I had to do something. I wanted to challenge myself. And once that I had gotten some traction back in my life with sport, with walking, with maybe some biking and running, I wanted to try something new. And that's when I found out about the Ironman races, specifically the Ironman 70.3, which is a triathlon race, which entitles 1.9 kilometers of swimming, then 90 kilometers on the bike, and then a half marathon, basically 20.1 kilometers, 21.1 kilometers. So when I found this, I thought it would be a great way to challenge myself. There were so many things I had in my mind at the time regarding my mom's passing and how sport really gave me a good connection to try and relieve some of the pain I had at the time. And I always wanted to let everything out on the run, on the bike, on the swim, and that really helped me with my state of mind and to keep on track. So when I signed up for my first Ironman in 70.3 back in 2018, I thought I knew what it would take. It's a swim, bike, run, basically. I put in the hours, I stick to the plan, and I get through it. And I did that for 10 months. That's exactly what I did. I was disciplined. I followed the textbook, and I believe more volume and more progress. So I did very long workouts. I focused purely on swimming, cycling, and running. I got quite technical in regards to the process. I was keeping track of my progress. I had a tracking sheet. I had blocks of 10 days where I will measure my effort and will measure my weight and see how I was doing. And I got it done after 10 months on race day. I did it. I crossed the finish line, and it was successful in my view. But the truth is that my body was really in pieces. I was destroyed by the training, I would say. I was trying to soak it up, as most people say, and it was very emotional for me to finish that race. I had my best friend Carlos at the finish line with me, and it was painful, but we got it done. And it was amazing. It was an amazing feeling of relief to let go of all those things that I had in my head, in my mind, to say goodbye to my mom. And it really helped me. But in the weeks after the race, I felt quite empty, quite broken. I wasn't feeling emotionally well. My legs, my back, everything hurt really. The training took everything out of me. Instead of bouncing back into it, I was really struggling. And I think I was already thinking about the next race. I wanted to prepare again. But this time the question was different. Not not I wasn't asking myself if I could finish the race, but how can I keep doing this without destroying myself because of the toll that the previous training block took in me. And that's when it hit me. I really, if I trained the same way again, I was going to crash. I was going to hurt. So I thought I needed something else, right? Something smarter, something that could help me or bring me in the right direction of where I should go. So I started looking outside my bubble, really. I was going through social media, as you do, looking through videos, maybe looking at people from my past and see what they've done in sport and in life. And then one name kept kept showing up. His name was Ezequiel. As I like to call him El Profe, which means the coach in Spanish. So Ezequiel and I, we crossed paths years ago. This was back in, I believe, 2010, 2011. But at the time in 2021, when I saw him again, he had grown into something else, something different. He became a teacher, a guide. He became someone who wasn't selling illusions or magic formulas, but someone who practiced what he preached. He was grounded, he was pragmatic, he was very humble. And the way he spoke about movement and breathing and flexibility and core exercises and clarity of movement, it was clear he had a philosophy that went far beyond swimming, biking, and running. So I contacted him after so many years. I remember him from when I was back in uni and we spoke a bit, not too much, but it clicked to me at the time that maybe this is someone who I need to talk to. So I reached out and we got in touch and I explained the situation. I simply asked him for core exercises. I'll never forget that. And he said, "Yeah, of course, I can just give you that." But in the context that he spoke to me, he talked about so many other things that I didn't understand at the time that would really help my preparation and the outlook of life, really. Not just sport, really. I think it was more than just sport. It was about being at peace with yourself, about growing as a human being, and about being the best that you can be in life. And so, with that being said, Ezequiel really helped me, and I'm so happy that I have him here with me today. So, welcome, El Profe. How are you doing today? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey Andres, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me in your podcast.
Absolutely, Profe. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to give a brief introduction about Ezequiel and his credentials. So he's got a bachelor degree on physical culture, education, sports, and training and recreation. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist by the National Strength and Conditioning Association back in Colombia. He's got a master's degree on high performance sports training, and he currently is the CEO of Conciencia Corporal or Conscious Movement, a high performance training in Colombia. He currently runs his business mostly online for strength and conditioning and sports. He does coaching consultation with professional and developing athletes. He also volunteers at his local school as a physical education teacher, working with the community, and he uses Ultimate Frisbee as a motor skill and social relationship learning tool for his volunteering at the school. On his free time, he enjoys gardening, and he's got a few crops running like corn, beans, and squash. And he actually has worked with the Colombian National Federation of Ultimate Frisbee. He participated on a few world championships, and most recently, the women's team got second place, an eighth place for the men's team on the World Championships in Australia in 2024. He's also coached and guided amateur and professional athletes in trail running, football, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, ultimate frisbee, triathlon, golf, tennis, capoeira, and rock climbing. So as you guys can see, he's got a vast experience in the field, and I feel extremely lucky and grateful to have cross paths with him once I started my preparation for my races. So I appreciate that, Ezequiel. Thank you so much, Profe, for that. So let's dig into it. All right, so having Ezequiel here with us today is great. I'm very happy that you're giving us your time to come in and have a chat and maybe get a bit technical into the concepts that you work with conscious movement, body awareness, which I think obviously is really important for the context of the things that we did together, training and the context of what you've done in your life, right? How you get to that point when you started the program. As I said before, back in 2010, maybe when I met you, I was already, I think, leaving university, or I was already out of university, and you were in uni, and you were studying PE. I remember you used to play football, and that's really all I remember about you back then. And obviously, when we reconnected, we spoke about the body awareness system that you work with, conscious movement. It was really important for me to see and understand how you did those things. So I'm just curious about how did the body awareness concept, um, came to you or started for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I played football pretty much since I was 3, 4 years old, and my dream was to become a professional football player, like many other people. Um, and as I started to grow up, right around my teenage years, there was a lot of issues that I was dealing with that I didn't really know how to deal with, especially emotional injuries that reflected on physical injuries. And I'm talking about since I was maybe 12, 13, 14. So I was very young. And, my parents clearly didn't really know how to deal with this type of situations either. And as I started to grow up a little bit later in my teenage years, when I started to play college football back in the US, I started to see some patterns. But when you're young, you don't really understand those patterns. And when I when I started to get more injuries and they were more frequent, I noticed that my strength and conditioning, my eating habits, my posture, the way I was dealing with the stress and the social pressure that comes in an everyday basis, I started to see some things that I wanted to change. But like I said before, I didn't really have the tools to do so. So when I started to study in the university, when I moved to Colombia, from the US to Colombia, there was a class, sports psychology class, and the teacher, she, on her spare time, she would ask any of us if we wanted to maybe, have a session with her and, just learn a little bit more in the theory into the practice. And I took advantage of that. And I took a few sessions with her, and we started to identify some psychological things, like somatic issues that were reflected in my body. So that was like the break point for conscious movement training. I noticed that if I tackle my posture and I tackle my breathing and I tackle biotensegrity, and conscious eating and just emotional intelligence, that those were the key points, not only for me, but, now as a sports training bachelorette, I would have more tools for people to deal with their problems in a better way. So basically, in a very brief way, this was sort of the break point where I noticed that I was doing a lot of things, but none of those things were really taking me where I wanted to go. So I decided to, I want to help people, young people, especially in development youth sports, to reach their maximum potential, but not just in sports, but in their lifestyle. So I came up with these 5 pillars, or these 5 basically like foundations, which is posture, breathing, biotensegrity, conscious eating, and conscious intelligence or emotional intelligence. That was, I'm talking about maybe back in 2000, yeah, 2010, 2011.
Great. No, that's a great background story. And when we probably bring those habits from a young age, right, it's difficult to break them as we are adults, right? When we become a functioning adult, when we have commitments and family, and in my case, a wife and children, we bring those things with us. That baggage comes with us, right? And we just maybe feel that that's how we learn to deal with those things, and that's how we should deal with those things, and maybe we don't realize that there are other better ways of doing it, right?
Right, right.
All right, cool. So I think in that context, what you mentioned is really important, right? When you said that, maybe there are better ways to achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and you want to help others achieve that potential as well. That brings me into the word of the day, which is pragmatism. So when people hear the word pragmatism and they think about maybe philosophy or business or other things, but I think in the context of life and sport is very important. So for you personally, and based on your experience, how does pragmatism show up in sport and in everyday life?
Cool. Yeah, I like that question. And I like the word as well. I actually identify with the word pragmatism very much, not just in my regular daily basis, but also in my life project that has to do with conscious movement. Instead of, if you think about like strength and conditioning, endurance, and training or just sports training in general, or even training for a healthy lifestyle, when you think about the amount of time that a lot of people spend trying to figure out how to do things right, that's where, to me, pragmatism comes in a very good form. And what I mean by that is that if you could spend about 30 to 45 minutes doing a specific workout that involves, just clearing your mind, involves connecting with your breath and connecting with your body in general, every second that you spend in the gym or in your home doing the workout, it's going to be more advantageous than spending, an hour going to the gym, 2 hours in the gym, and then an hour going back to your house.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's kind of how I see pragmatism when we talk about strength and conditioning or just physical culture in general. So it's doing more with less things that are more effective and efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So, use the tools that you have at your disposal, what's available, and make the most of it, right?
Yep, for sure.
That's a clear example. No, thank you so much. And going back to that, back in 2020, I believe, when I
Mhm.
contacted you about, my triathlon, how my experience in 2019 was, and how I thought it was just basically swim, bike, run. And I mentioned to you, just give me core exercises, and you just sort of, well, I can do that if you want, that's fine. But obviously, you told me there is a lot more than just that, right? Not just, running and
Correct.
cycling and swimming. How does that approach of conscious movement that you preach so much, and how pragmatic you are? So how that approach and listening to your own body change the way that athletes prepare for races?
Yeah, so at the beginning it might seem like it's more work, but once you start to interiorize and you start to just realize that by adding, a little bit of like listening to your body when it's screaming for help, that takes time off your thinking. So if you have your mind clear because your body feels good, your body feels ready, your body feels strong, it feels, ready for whatever you want to do, then when you think about it that way, then you're not putting more time. You're actually just doing a little bit of a few things, a few tasks that are going to make your whatever sport you're doing, in this case, swimming, cycling, and running. So if you take care of your body by releasing tension from places where there shouldn't be any tension, if you take care of your body by connecting dots in your body that are going to make each movement more proficient and more effective, then that's going to make your running more economic. It's going to make your swimming more economic. It's going to make your cycling more economic. And what I mean by economic is, if you have a bag of energy, just to put it in an analogy, you have to save that energy in order for your performance to be around where you want it to be. Because if you take that energy and focus on the pain that you're feeling, if you take that energy and focus on what you haven't eat or what you have just eaten, and you're doubting about yourself with many things, not just the physical and the eating, but also emotional things, then that's taking energy from the bag that you're taking into the race or to the training session. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the breathing exercises, the tension release, all those things really help me out because without having that control over yourself to make you feel prepared and ready, then you'll worry about those other things that you really cannot control, right? You cannot control the temperature of the water, you cannot control a puncture on the bike, but at least you're prepared to face those challenges in a better way, right? So
Right.
100%, I think that approach really helped me, and it really helped me because I can obviously I'm a testament that helped me right back in 2023 when we when we prepared together for that race in
Hmm.
in Portugal, right? So as we push through all those things, right, obviously it's not an easy process because there is pain, right? There is always pain, there is discomfort because you gotta run, long runs for a half Ironman. I'm talking about 15, 18-kilometer runs, 2-hour runs, and very long bike stretches. Pain is always there, right? But I think the most important thing is that when you push through that pain and you ignore the signs, then from that point of view of just ignoring what's happening to your body, Why do you think it's so important to adapt to the reality you're facing rather than forcing what you think should work best for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So taking one of the last sentences that you mentioned, like pushing through pain, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that amateur and professional athletes, make in their process of whatever race or whatever competition or tournament they're preparing for. Because when you push through pain, you're pretty much ignoring, like you said, ignoring important signs that your body's trying to tell you. So my approach, or the way that I approach pain, is that in a very primal way, human beings, we are pretty much designed to run away from pain and to run towards pleasure, right? So when you think about it that way, if you're running away from pain, then you're running away from things that you have to do but you don't want to do. So
Yeah.
and maybe in that 10-kilometer mark or 15-kilometer mark or whatever, distance you're running, and all those things start to, come in the back of your head. It's like, why didn't I, eat the right way? Or why didn't I strengthen my feet? Or why didn't I release tension from my lower back? Or even, I mean, obviously, if you're conscious about these things and you're wondering this while you're racing, then that's a big issue. But if you're not even conscious that these things can help you, then those questions might not even appear. You're just pushing through it. You're just, oh, I have to, deal with this pain. I have to finish the race. And of course, you're going to finish it because we as human beings, we're super strong and we're super resistant. But the thing is, how you finish that race tells a lot about the lifestyle that you're living and the things that you're dealing with in your life that manifest while you're pushing your body to the limits. So, in a brief way, I'd say, pushing through pain, it sounds kind of contradictory, but it's almost like really not wanting to perform well. When you go around pain, then you're doing everything that you should do in the right way so you perform the best way possible.
Yeah, of course. Like obviously in a race, maybe your adrenaline is high. You're trying to get to the finish line, and I've been obviously guilty of that. When I'm in my runs, usually I push way too hard at the beginning, and things change rather quickly, right? In a race, it's really important, as you said, that as you're pushing through that, understand there are mechanisms around that, so you don't have to deal with that pain in that extreme way, right? Because the pain might be there, but it's just working around that pain in a pragmatic way to deal with why does the pain come? How can I work to prevent that, as you said? So that's a great analogy there. And I do obviously remember, right, as we went through all the blocks of training for the Ironman and previously to that, to the other blocks of training that we did, I will always keep you posted, right, on my pains and niggles and this and that, and obviously my lower back, my leg, my hamstrings. And it's really important, obviously, that that connection exists because then in that way you can advise or tell me how can I adapt my training, which we did many times. And many times I was very stubborn and I went and tried to do a personal best when I shouldn't have, and I pulled my groin for like 3 weeks. And you will tell me that. And now I understand the importance of those things, right? Of working through that. And I think you have to leave that on your own flesh to be able to really understand the meaning of that, right? The last thing I want is to be injured 4 weeks before a race, or 6 to 7 weeks before a race, because that will really damage, or will make your training even worse. So that's a really, really great thing. And on the side of that, now, once you start working through those things with, like as I did with you, and I guess it's the same with you working with all your clients and the athletes that you train. I always feel that your approach is really about the connection as a human, right? As people, and you really take the time to understand maybe the way that we approach life, maybe the way that I was feeling at the time, and all the things that happened throughout those years that obviously you don't show them out to the world. You don't, people see you and they don't understand maybe what's going on in your life. And that really played a big part because apart from feeling that connection with my coach, I was feeling that I had a real human connection with someone who wanted me to be the best that I can be, right? So that kind of friendship and trust played a huge role on helping someone like me, like an average guy, just grow and feel more like an athlete, really. Like I do feel at the starting line of the races, I felt like I was an athlete, like I was around 2,000, 3,000 people, and I feel like, man, I'm in the middle of a race where I can actually perform as an athlete, right? So how do you think that this process that we went through a few times to prepare for these races helped us connect as friends, first of all, because I do consider you a true friend, and it's something that we have created throughout the years with this connection. So as somebody grows as an athlete, as a person, how do you think it helped that connection as friends, as human beings in our case?
Yeah. So, I mean, in our case, in particular, and like you said, I think it applies to at least every personal training client that that I have the pleasure and the honor to work with, especially with cycle sports like running, swimming, biking. I feel like the way I see sports training and strength and conditioning in general, first of all, is my passion. It's what I love to do. I love to be able to be a part of solving an issue that somebody's trying to solve and hasn't find a solution. So the method that I use, the conscious movement method, I think it helps to bring people together. In this case, sort of in a very general way, this client coach relationship grows into a friendship relationship because you start to understand as a coach that you're a human being. It sounds obvious, but you have a family, you have young kids, you have a job, you have to deal with stress, you have to deal with a lot of things that I have to deal with as well. So once I put myself in your shoes, or try to put myself in your shoes, it's easier for me to connect in a more human way. So I'm not just preaching or just giving you instructions. I'm actually trying to understand where you're coming from when you're asking questions like, hey, what do you think I should do about X or Y thing related to strength and conditioning or something, and that starts to open up doors where we start to connect in a more profound way. At least that's how I see it. That's how I feel. I feel that if I just give you a bunch of exercises in a specific order, like in a periodized order, I feel like you might be able to get some results, but if I'm able to connect with what you're feeling, what you're going through, especially, and this is just a small parenthesis, especially at the time that we started training in the middle of pandemic,
Yeah.
that was a very difficult moment. I think for you and for me, it was helpful to have somebody to give you support through sport. So I think that also has a lot to do with our friendship now, Andres. We lived through difficult times. I, as a coach, was trying to look, that reference of maybe looking a little bit, like everything's cool, everything's fine. But there was some times where I was honest with you as well, and you listened in a very humble way, and that helped me too. And I think that also built our current friendship. So sports training, brings people together for some reasons that we don't really understand until we start to see beyond those results that sports want to bring, which is win a championship or perform well in a tournament. So once you see beyond that, you start, and if you see it if somebody's listening to this, a young coach or a young trainee, once you start to see beyond the sports results, then the sports results become a lot more enriching for your life.
Oh, that's really good. No, I totally agree. No, absolutely. And it's a good way to end that answer. It's true. And just because we're friends doesn't mean you're not pushing me on the training sessions, by the way. I just want to clarify that. He still makes me suffer through those. But no, I think, yeah, that connection definitely, especially for the last race in in Portugal in 2023. My dad passed in 21. We had to sort of stop there for a while because I was just dealing with that stuff, and then I just made the conscious decision of pushing through one more time to get that done. So really great. It was great, and I really appreciate your time and dedication through those years. Right, and just to close this off, Coach, I just want to ask you really for advice for just for people or just regular people, who's stuck on a rigid routine or struggling with setbacks of dealing with family stress, trying to fit sport in their life, a healthy diet, all these things. What's the one or couple of pragmatic changes that they can make today to try and move forward in sport and in life?
So, if I was to give just one advice or just a couple of advices, I would focus on just being honest with yourself takes up a lot of load from your shoulders in life in general. Sports have the capacity to show you this in a very hard way or in a very easy way. So if you like sports and you enjoy training, sweating, feeling your muscles like demanding a lot of energy from you and that feels good for you, then taking into consideration what I mentioned, just a few seconds ago is just be honest with yourself and do things around just being honest with what you would do when nobody is looking. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I see it.
It, it makes complete sense, right? Like when nobody's watching, right? That's when you need to be
Right.
honest. No, that's great. I believe that doing that first step when you have to accept the fact that you're struggling, that you need help, it's obviously a big step. I was personally very stubborn with the way I was doing things back in 2019, and obviously that's coming back from years of not struggles, right? I'm not trying to be a victim of
Mhm.
my story, but it's just everybody deals with their situations in the way that they feel them, right? So nobody else can really feel those things for you, right? So the way that you live those experiences is what makes you act and be the way you are, right? And I think
Right.
accepting those, as you say, is a great first step in the context of being pragmatic to understand, okay, this is what is happening to me. These are the tools available to me. How am I going to make this better, right? So that's
Right.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Profe. I really appreciate your time today. It's been great having you. I obviously cannot thank you enough for your time. I know it's really early over there in Colombia. So thank you so much for your time. And I really, really look forward to getting this episode out for people to listen to it.
Thank you so much, Andres.
Really appreciate you, Profe. Thank you. Big, big thanks to Ezequiel, Profe, for joining me today and for sharing his wisdom. The experience I had through my training process with him was amazing. It was tiring, obviously, because the routines and the exercise, everything adds up and it builds up. But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life to be able to train with him and prepare for my races. So thank you so much, Profe, for being here. If you want to learn more about Ezequiel and his program, you can visit www.soyfuerzainterna.com or find him on Instagram at Ezemoves. That's EZEMOVES at Ezemoves on Instagram. And for me, this was more than just training. It was about pragmatism, adapting to reality, and building true human connections. And Ezekiel has been a clear part, a big part of my life and a big part of my training. And I'm very, very happy to call him a friend today. And I hope that I get to train with him again in the future. Thank you so much for listening. I want to thank you for your time, and I will see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope this episode finds you well. If you liked this episode, please stay tuned in for more.